I think it's interesting. I don't always read the Daily Telegraph, and it's possibly um, to my discredit that I come across newspapers later than perhaps I should do. And this morning I was pottering through some articles and I came across the Daily Telegraph, and I'd already made a video about Tom Tugendhat's rather lackluster, more restrained and maybe diplomatic interview with Laura Kuenssberg this morning on Sunday. And the contrast with the interview that he gave to the Daily Telegraph, which offers a fiery, impassioned critique of both his opponents and the broader Conservative Party's position. He's presented as a man deeply frustrated by the state of his party and the political class, and his rhetoric is uncompromising. He decries his opponents for playing games and emphasises that the upcoming leadership contest is an existential fight for the future of the Conservative Party. I think he's right. And for the future of a party in opposition. His critique isn't limited to the internal politics of his party. He paints Labour as a threat to the country's future, characterising the current government as appalling and socialist. This language suggests a leader who sees himself as the last bastion of conservatism in the face of what he views as a disastrous political trajectory for the country. The point is, we are in that position because of the stupidity of the last Conservative government, of the last 2 years, starting with Liz Truss. But maybe that was already inaugurated by Boris Johnson, or I would like to say by Theresa May, and by David Cameron's ducking of responsibility after the referendum. That is the point. That is the point at which Britain lost control. And it's not about whether you are a Conservative or whether you are a Lib Dem or a Labour Party supporter, or indeed you now feel, as I do, that you have no party. It's about the fracturing of political competence. And it took place, I think, at that particular moment in 2016 when David Cameron resigned. Now, that coincides with the Brexit referendum. I don't think the Brexit referendum was the point at which Britain went to pieces. The point at which Britain went to pieces was the following day when David Cameron resigned. It was Cameron's resignation, abrogating responsibility. I don't care. The I don't careism and the ushering in of a torrent of introspection was a refusal to do the job that these people have been elected to do. And one of the striking elements of the interview Tom Tugendhat gave is his emphasis on polling data. He repeatedly insisted that he was the only candidate capable of beating Labour leader Keir Starmer, saying that he consistently polls better than his rivals with voters across political spectrums, from Labour to Reform UK. He may be right. This emphasis on electability is a key part of his pitch and is framed as his unique qualification to lead the party. He's quite right. All the other candidates will lead the party only to Reform UK, or to genuflecting before Nigel Farage. And while his claims are bold, the interview acknowledges that his fourth place finish in the first round of voting signals that his appeal may not resonate with Conservative, with Tory MPs. His anger at the perceived tactical voting and game playing among MPs is palpable, yet this sentiment could be read as somewhat hypocritical given the nature of internal party politics, and his warnings that the party could face 0 MPs if they continue down this path are dramatic and signal his view that the Conservative Party is in a more precarious position than many in his party realise. And he is absolutely right. Meanwhile, his appearance on Laura Quensberg's Sunday morning show was notably more subdued. In contrast to the firebrand rhetoric of the Daily Telegraph interview, he struck a more measured and cautious tone. That isn't appropriate for television. Rather than making sweeping existential claims about the future of the party and the country, his discussion on Quensberg's programme focused on policy and more traditional talking points. The difference in tone may have been deliberate but was misjudged. The Telegraph audience is more likely to be attuned to Tugendhat's sharp critique of both the left and the right wing of politics, while Quensberg's broader BBC audience requires a more statesmanlike demeanour, but maybe this isn't the time for that. Dull is not captivating. In the Quensberg interview, Tugendhat spoke about issues such as foreign policy, Brexit, and his own experiences in government, but he lacked the emotional intensity that is clearly there in the Telegraph interview. And this difference may indicate his attempt to appeal to different voter bases. The traditional Conservative voters through the Telegraph, the more general voters with Quensberg. The more cautious language on Quensberg's show also reflects a different strategic approach. Tugendhat avoided making personal attacks or dramatic claims about his rivals, whereas in the Telegraph he took a fairly unveiled dig at Robert Jenrick and voiced frustration at other MPs, accusing them of betraying the Conservative membership. The tension between the two Tugendhats, these two media appearances, highlights a calculated dual strategy that I'm not sure Tugendhat is best placed to serve. In the Telegraph he is impassioned. He is the angry defender of the Conservative Party's future. But in his appearance on the Laura Quensberg show, he is the careful, strategic politician. The Telegraph interview is the more revealing of his underlying frustrations and his political aspirations, but the Quensberg appearance shows the limits of how far he is willing to take those frustrations in public, and I think also shows the limits of his preparation and his guidance. If I were offering advice to Tugendhat, I would say go for it. Because actually he has nothing to lose, and the country has everything to lose, because we do not need another 2 years of an introspective, ill-focused opposition. That is not good for the country. More than that, we certainly do not need a bunch of disgruntled Conservative MPs drifting off into Reform UK, bolstering the self-assured reputation of Nigel Farage. I think Tom Tugendhat's candidacy, while clearly struggling within the party, has certainly the mix of bold vision and pragmatic restraint. I'm just not convinced he's got it. I'm just not convinced he's got it the right way round. I think the restraint should have been in the Telegraph article, and the boldness should have been on the BBC. But he's right that the duality reflects the precariousness of his current political standing. He's right to tone his to show different aspects of his personality. I think he's just got the wrong audience for the wrong bit of his personality. He's left the wrong bit of his personality at the studio door, and he's exposed the wrong bits in the wrong places. But, you know, what's done is done. We can't cry over spilt milk. And I fear we're heading rapidly towards a vicious leadership and the obliteration of the Conservative Party. And what will replace it? One could hope in vain for the Lib Dems to step up. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the more likely scenario is the growth of Reform UK and a right-wing unelectable party, uh, and a very long time in office for the Labour Party, to the point where it too may find itself unelectable. And, maybe now is the time to seriously consider proportional representation, and to reflect that the big Labour Party, the big Conservative Party, are a mass of differing views. Maybe those views should be presented to the electorate, and maybe it's after the election that the horse trading and the negotiations should take place to see which coalition best fits, rather than that negotiation, that horse trading taking place before the electorate even gets involved. Because at the moment, that horse trading and that control is done by either the Labour Party or the Conservative Party. And this fascination with a broad church appeal. A broad church appeal silences so many voices. And I think now there are many voices in the Labour Party that want to speak out against the pension plans and the attack on heating, but they can't, because they are threatened by the possibility of having the whip withdrawn, even if they should abstain from voting on Tuesday. Is that the sort of coalition we want? I think we need a more honest politics.